Okay, it's 5 o'clock local Hawaii Standard Time, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jennifer Piggott, and I will serve as the facilitator for tonight's meeting. Thank you for taking the time to join us. Before we get started, I'd like to note that this meeting is being recorded. If you do not wish to be part of this recording, please disconnect from the call. The recording will be placed on the Pacific Islands Fish and Wildlife Office website within 5 business days. While we are sure many of you have been following the development of the proposed KIUC HCP closely, we'd like to go ahead and review the purpose of today's meeting. We will be providing information on the environmental review process for federal agency decisions on incidental take permits associated with the KIUC HCP. This process is known as NEPA, or the National Environmental Policy Act. Additionally, we're here to provide information on the proposed HCP, as well as explain the purpose of Environmental Impact Statement, or EIS, and how to provide public comments to aid the team in the development of the EIS. I'd like to review our agenda for this evening. We'll spend the first few minutes reviewing Zoom webinar tips and troubleshooting. As part of today's meeting, we have several presentations from our project partners, starting off with an overview of the proposed action with KIUC Draft Habitat Conservation Plan, presented by KIUC's representative, Don Huff. Due to the government shutdown, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is not participating in tonight's meeting, but we have a pre-recorded presentation. We'll hear from Leila Nagatani, a wildlife biologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, in a pre-recorded presentation giving an overview of the federal HCP and NEPA process and an overview of the draft EIS. Then we'll hear from Jesse Adams from the Division of Forestry and Wildlife under DLNR. He'll provide an overview of the state process for the draft EIS and the draft HCP. Lastly, I'll provide background on the comment process and review how and where to provide your comments online or via mail. Please note public comments will not be accepted at tonight's meeting. After the presentations have concluded, we'll review next steps. Just a reminder to our public meeting attendees this evening, you will be muted throughout the duration of the webinar. If you're having logistical issues with the Zoom webinar, please notify our team using the chat feature located at the bottom of your screen. If you're having audio issues, please make sure your Zoom audio settings are connected to your computer or device speakers. Please check your audio settings button. If you continue to experience audio issues, you may join this webinar via phone by calling toll-free 1-888-788-0099. The webinar ID is 810-9319-9367, and the passcode is 073317. I'll repeat this again. The webinar ID is 810-9319-9367, and the passcode is 073317. Our host will also drop this information into the chat box. Please note that any comments submitted into the chat box are not considered official public comments. Lastly, as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded. We expect to make the webinar recording available on the Pacific Islands Fish and Wildlife Office website within 5 business days. Okay, now I'd like to introduce and turn things over to Don Huff. Don, over to you.
Thank you, Jennifer, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dawn Huff. I manage the development and implementation of KIUC's Habitat Conservation Plan that I will refer to today as the HCP. This presentation will provide an overview of the draft HCP that is currently available for public review. The HCP includes an executive summary and 11 chapters. The main body of the HCP is covered in chapters 1 through 8, with chapters 9, 10, and 11 being composed of a list of references, the glossary, and a list of contributors. Chapter 1 introduces the background, need, and purpose for the HCP and defines the plan area, covered species, and the permit term. Chapter 2 outlines the activities that are covered and not covered by the HCP. Chapter 3 describes the existing conditions of the plan area and summarizes the data sources used to inform the HCP. Chapter 4 presents the conservation strategy, which includes a set of biological goals and objectives, and the conservation measure that define the specific management actions that KIUC will take to implement the conservation strategy. Chapter 5 prevents an evaluation of the effects to each species as a result of the HCP. This chapter includes the requested take of the covered species and an evaluation of the impact of the taking and the beneficial effects of the conservation strategy. Chapter 6 presents the monitoring plan and adaptive management program. Chapter 7 describes the regulatory and funding assurances and the process for revision and amendments. Chapter 8 identifies alternatives considered by KIUC to reduce take of the covered species that were deemed infeasible and/or impracticable and not included in the conservation strategy. KIUC prepared the draft HCP in coordination with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and DOFA to address incidental take of 9 federal and state listed species through avoidance, minimization, and mitigation. The listed species include 3 seabirds, 5 water birds, and 1 sea turtle. A draft HCP was first published in January 2023 through the State of Hawaii Environmental Review Program's publication called the Environmental Notice. That draft underwent a 60-day public comment period and was reviewed by the state's Endangered Species Recovery Committee. The draft HCP currently available for public review includes revisions to the January 2023 draft based on ESRC comments and public comments. By way of background, in 2011, KIUC was issued a federal incidental take permit for a 5-year term based on KIUC's short-term habitat conservation plan. Through the short-term HCP, KIUC started implementing conservation measures for the covered seabirds and continued implementing these measures through the development of the current draft HCP. After the expiration of the short-term HCP, KIUC continued and expanded seabird conservation efforts and is currently implementing all the draft HCP conservation measures for the covered seabirds and covered water birds. Data collected through the short-term HCP and the years following its expiration in 2016 greatly informed the development of the current draft HCP. The covered species include Newell's shearwater, Hawaiian petrel, Van-rump storm petrel, Hawaiian stilt, Hawaiian duck, Hawaiian coot, Hawaiian common gallinule, Hawaiian goose, and the green sea turtle. The plan area where all covered activities and conservation measures will occur is the island of Kauaʻi. The permit area includes the specific locations of all the covered activities and conservation measures. The figure on the right is a map of Kauaʻi showing the locations of KIUC's covered facilities. The areas highlighted in red represent locations of the streetlights. The yellow triangles are 2 of KIUC's generating stations, and the green lines represent locations of KIUC's overhead electrical system. The covered activities include the operation of existing and future power lines and streetlights. There are approximately 171 miles of transmission lines, 1,360 miles of distribution lines, and 70 miles of communication lines existing on KIUC's overhead electrical system. There are approximately 4,150 existing streetlights across Kauaʻi that are owned and maintained by KIUC. The HCP covers the operation of up to 360 miles of new lines and up to 1,754 new streetlights that may be needed throughout the permit term to respond to growing development and power needs. Implementation of the conservation strategy is also a covered activity. Power line and streetlight construction and installation are not covered activities because they are not expected to result in take of a listed species. The conservation strategy was developed in coordination with and under the guidance of U.S. Fish and Wildlife and DOFA. The biological goals state the intentions of the HCP, The objectives are measurable targets by which the HCP will be evaluated, and the conservation measures are the actions that will be implemented by KIUC to collectively achieve the biological goals and objectives. The conservation strategy includes minimizing effects of power line collisions and light attraction to the covered species, managing a designated areas to benefit the covered seabirds and the green sea turtle, and contributing a net benefit to all the covered species. Conservation measure number 1 involves implementing power line collision minimization projects to reduce impacts to the covered seabirds and waterbirds. The photos on the left of the screen are 2 examples of bird diverters installed by KIUC for power line collision minimization. The top photo is of reflective diverters in Waimea at night. Reflective diverters reflect ambient light from either the surrounding town or the moon, alerting birds to the presence of lines in the air. The bottom photo is of an LED diverter being installed on Powerline Trail by a drone. LED diverters have a blinking light that is visible to birds flying towards the lines. Conservation measure number 2 involves the implementation of measures to minimize light attraction impacts to the covered seabirds. These minimization actions include full cutoff shields on street lights and outdoor facility lights, which block light from projecting upwards towards the sky, and the dimming of night lighting at the Port Allen generating station throughout the fledgling season, which is September 15th through December 15th. Conservation measure number 3 involves the funding of the Save Our Shearwaters program, also known as SOS. KIUC has been a primary funder of SOS for many years, and through this HCP, KIUC will provide $300,000 of funding each year to SOS, adjusted for inflation annually, for the 50-year permit term in support of the rehabilitation of injured seabirds and waterbirds. Conservation measure number 4 involves the management and enhancement of seabird breeding habitat and colonies at conservation sites. Specifically, KIUC will manage 12 designated conservation sites where mules, shearwater, and Hawaiian petrel are known to breed. 8 of these sites are located on state land, and 4 are located on private land. Conservation measure number 5 involves the implementation of a nest detection and shielding program for the green sea turtle. KIUC will conduct annual monitoring and shielding of identified green sea turtle nests located on beaches with suitable sea turtle nesting habitat within view of KIUC-owned streetlights. Beach locations will be determined on a yearly basis through annual surveys. Conservation measure number 6 involves the identification and implementation of practicable streetlight minimization techniques for the green sea turtle. To identify practicable minimization techniques that could be used on streetlights to reduce light attraction of the green sea turtle, KIUC would coordinate with the County of Kauaʻi and State of Hawaii. The photos on the left were taken at conservation sites identified in the HCP and that KIUC currently manages. The top photo is of a Newell's shearwater in its burrow and was taken by the Colony Monitoring Team, ARC. The bottom photo is of the predator exclusion fence at Honopu and was taken by the predator control team, Halleck's Ecosystem Restoration. This fence was constructed by other entities prior to KIUC's involvement with the sites. KIUC took over management of Honopu in 2022 and will maintain the fence throughout the 50-year permit term. This table provides a list of the 12 conservation sites identified in the draft HCP where KIUC would conduct seabird management actions to address conservation measure number 4. All these sites are located in Northwest Kauaʻi, as shown in the map on the right. This area of Kauaʻi was chosen because it's where seabirds are most prevalent and where risk of impacts are at their lowest. At 8 of the sites, management actions include intensive predator control and invasive plant control. These sites include Upper Limahuli Preserve, North Bog, Pohakea, Pihea, Hanakoa, Hanakapiai, Honopu, and Upper Manoa Valley. At 4 of these sites, management actions include predator exclusion fencing, 2 involving construction of new fences, and all 4 involving maintenance of fences, social attraction, predator control, and invasive plant control. From 2020 to 2024, KIUC implemented an island-wide power line collision minimization plan. The combined minimization actions KIUC has conducted through 2024 is estimated to result in a 66.4% reduction of power line collisions. Doing this minimization prior to the HCP being finalized has immediate and direct benefits to the covered seabirds and water birds, improving the baseline of these species. Minimization actions include static wire removal, installation of bird diverters, and power line reconfiguration projects that reduce the number of lines in the air and reduce the overall height of lines. In many parts of the island, a combination of static wire removal and installation of bird diverters have been used to maximize strike reduction potential. All minimization projects will be maintained for the permit term, and minimization will be applied to new power lines. Additional minimization may be applied to existing power lines where indicated by adaptive management. The map on the right shows areas where minimization has occurred. The purple lines represent installation of reflective diverters, and the blue lines represent installation of LED diverters, which are only in areas away from roadways and neighborhoods for public safety reasons. The yellow, green, and orange lines are areas where reconfiguration projects have been completed. Because static wire removal was combined with other forms of minimization in almost all locations, it doesn't show up on this map. However, almost all static wire has been removed from KIUC's system with very few exceptions in areas that cannot be accessed or where it was retained for lightning protection at substations. Chapter 5 presents the evaluation of effects in the take request. Adverse effects as a result of take are evaluated in combination with the beneficial effects of the conservation strategy to inform conclusions regarding expected outcomes from the HCP or the net effects. A population dynamics model was developed to inform the analysis for Newell shearwater and Hawaiian petrel. The model incorporates data collected on Kauaʻi over the last 20 years for these species. 2 modeling scenarios are presented in the HCP that project the plausible bounds of what may occur as a result of the HCP and in the absence of the HCP. One scenario, referred to as the worst-case scenario, assumes the covered seabird population on Kauaʻi is currently in decline. And the second scenario, referred to as the stable trend scenario, assumes the covered seabird population on Kauaʻi is stable, neither increasing nor decreasing. This table provides a summary of the take request for the covered seabirds, which is categorized by the type of take. The type of take expected for Newell shearwater and Hawaiian petrel includes power line collisions, light attraction from KIUC's street lights and facility lights, and take associated with management actions at the conservation sites. The total requested annual take for Newell shearwater is 6,595, and the total requested take for the 50-year permit term is 329,765. The total requested annual take for Hawaiian petrel is 2,479, and the total requested take for the 50-year permit term is 122,967. These take requests include a combination of adults, subadults, and the indirect take of chicks and eggs. The requested take for power line collisions includes line strikes resulting in no observed injury, non-lethal injury, mortality, and the associated indirect take from loss of chicks and eggs for non-lethal injury and mortality. every line strike is counted as take regardless of the outcome. For example, the requested take of Newell Shearwater as a result of power line collisions includes an estimated 42% of line strikes resulting in no observed injury, 26% of line strikes resulting in mortality, 22% of line strikes resulting in non-lethal injury, and approximately 10% for indirect take of chicks and eggs for the line strikes resulting in mortality and non-lethal injury. Band rump storm petrel are also impacted by power line collisions and light attraction, although to a lesser degree based on the available data. The annual requested take of band rump storm petrel is 1, and the requested take for the 50-year permit term is 71. Here we have a summary of the take request for the covered water birds and the green sea turtle. The type of take expected for all 5 water birds results from power line collisions, although a small amount of take of the Hawaiian duck and the Hawaiian goose is also expected to result from management actions at the conservation sites. Like the covered seabirds, every line strike is counted as take. The estimated annual take for the Hawaiian stilt is 1. The 50-year take request is 53. The estimated annual take for the Hawaiian duck is 10. The 50-year take request is 490. The estimated annual take for the Hawaiian coot is 2, and the 50-year take request is 107. The estimated annual take for the Hawaiian common gallinule is 2, and the 50-year take request is 107. The estimated annual take for the Hawaiian goose is 25, and the 50-year take request is 1,236. In addition to power line collision minimization, the funding of SOS is expected to offset take and provide a net benefit for the covered water birds. Based on SOS data, it is projected that the number of each water bird species rehabilitated by SOS will exceed the anticipated take of that same species, as you can see in the far right-hand column in this table. The estimated annual take of the green sea turtle is 1 nest per year. The 50-year take request is 50 nests. The HCP includes an extensive monitoring plan and a robust adaptive management program. There will be 3 types of monitoring. Compliance monitoring will track the status of the HCP implementation and that the requirements of the HCP are being met. Take monitoring will be used to compare the reported take that occurs during the HCP permit term to the authorized take limit. And effectiveness monitoring will be used to assess the biological performance of the HCP by evaluating the success of the conservation strategy. The adaptive management program is a structured approach to decision-making that utilizes a feedback loop of monitoring, evaluating, and adjusting the conservation strategy to achieve the HCP's biological goals and objectives. The diagram on the right displays how each step will inform adaptive management. Data collection and analysis will inform the planning and implementation of management actions, and compliance and effectiveness monitoring of those actions will inform an evaluation of the effectiveness of the program. The results of the effectiveness evaluation will inform decisions about when and how to adjust the management strategy. The regulatory agencies that will participate in the adaptive management process in coordination with KIUC include U.S. Fish and Wildlife, DOFA, the Endangered Species Recovery Committee, and the Department of Aquatic Resources for the portion related to the green sea turtle. Information in Chapter 7 on plan implementation describes the role of the regulatory agencies in KIUC. Change circumstances that are reasonably foreseeable during the permit term, and unforeseen circumstances for which state and federal regulatory assurances are requested, the estimated cost and funding assurances to implement the HCP, the process to revise or amend the HCP, and the requirements to report annually on implementation progress and monitoring results. Next slide, please. Here's a summary of the estimated cost to implement the HCP organized by different components of the program. The average annual estimated cost is $6,620,663. The total of the 50-year estimated HCP cost is $431,033,150. 40.9% of the estimated cost is related to the management and monitoring of the 12 conservation sites, and 37.4% is related to power line collision minimization and monitoring of KIUC's power lines and minimization effectiveness. The remaining 21.7% estimated costs would go towards plan administration, funding of the Save Our Shearwaters program, implementation of the Green Sea Turtle Nest Detection and Shielding program, state compliance monitoring, changed circumstances, adaptive management, and contingency. Approval of the final HCP and issuance of a federal incidental take permit and state incidental take license is critical to KIUC's continued operations that provide electricity to the island of Kauaʻi. Thank you for your time today and your interest in KIUC's HCP. Back to you, Jennifer.
Great. Thank you, Dawn, for that presentation. We'll now move on to the pre-recorded presentation from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Hi, my name is Leila Nagatani. I'm a biologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which from here I will refer to as the service. On behalf of the service, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. This presentation covers the federal process for the Draft Environmental Impact Statement, or EIS, that considers the environmental impacts of issuing an Incidental Take Permit, or ITP, associated with implementation of the Habitat Conservation Plan, or HCP, to KIUC. Please keep these acronyms in mind as I run through the presentation. As background, the service is reviewing KIUC's application for an Incidental Take Permit under the Endangered Species Act, which allows lawful activities that may unintentionally impact protected species. As part of the ITP process, KIUC has developed a habitat conservation plan detailing how it will avoid, minimize, and offset those impacts. Because issuing an ITP is a federal action, it requires review under the National Environmental Policy Act. The service, as the lead agency, must prepare an Environmental Impact Statement, or EIS, to evaluate the potential biological, cultural, social, and economic effects of issuing the permit. This chart shows a timeline of the NEPA and ESA federal processes. We have published the draft EIS and draft HCP and are currently in the 60-day public comment period as indicated by the red circles. Under NEPA, public comments on the draft EIS will be reviewed and considered before the service prepares the final EIS and a record of decision. The State Department of Land and Natural Resources, or DLNR, has served as a cooperating agency, providing expertise and review. The EIS is being prepared jointly with DLNR to meet both federal and state requirements. Under the ESA, the service assisted KIUC in developing its habitat conservation plan and will prepare a Section 7 biological opinion to assess impacts on listed species and critical habitat. It will also complete a Section 10 findings to determine if the HCP meets ESA requirements for issuing the incidental take permit. To issue an ITP, the service must ensure the take is incidental, impacts are minimized and mitigated, funding and contingency plans are in place, species survival and recovery are not jeopardized, and all other ESA requirements are met. Under NEPA, the action being considered by the service is whether to issue an ITP. After reviewing the ITP application and HCP, the service may approve, deny, or approve with conditions the ITP. This concludes the overview of the NEPA and ESA processes. In this section, I'll provide a brief overview of the draft EIS and how to provide comments on the draft EIS and draft HCP through the federal process. Afterward, Jesse Adams from DLNR will go over the state's process for the draft EIS and draft HCP and how to comment through the state process. The EIS addresses the purpose and need for the proposed federal action, a reasonable range of alternatives in addition to the proposed action, and the effects of the proposed action and alternatives on the human environment. Scoping for this EIS occurred in 2022. During that period, the public, interested parties, and agencies were asked to identify important issues, provide information, and suggest alternatives to the proposed actions that were considered in developing this EIS. In addition to the proposed action, an EIS considers a reasonable range of alternative courses of action that meet the purpose and need and are technically and economically feasible. 4 alternatives were analyzed in detail, and 8 other alternatives were considered but dismissed from detailed analysis. The following slides are a brief overview of the 4 alternatives analyzed. Alternative A is the no-action alternative that serves as a baseline with which to compare impacts from the proposed action and the other action alternatives. Under the no action, an ITP isn't issued and the HCP not implemented, which means take of listed species would not be authorized and KIUC would continue to be subject to ESA regulations. Also, KIUC would continue its operations without implementing new minimization and mitigation measures such as predator control. This means impacts to ESA-listed species would go unmitigated. Alternative B is the proposed action, which is the HCP that Dawn just presented on. Under the proposed action, the service would issue an ITP authorizing incidental take of the covered species from the covered activities over a 50-year permit term. And KIUC would implement the proposed HCP, including the conservation strategy, adaptive management, and the monitoring program. Alternative C includes Alternative B, but as measures minimizing impacts to covered seabird species such as reconfiguring existing power lines, removing static wires, adding illuminated flight diverters, and designing new lines to reduce collisions in remaining high collision areas. Also, the use of dimmers on streetlights to lessen light pollution, and funding Save Our Shearwaters to support public outreach, expand capacity, secure facilities, retain staff, and improve infrastructure. Alternative D includes Alternative B and the following additional mitigation measures. For seabirds, 3 mitigation sites would be added, totaling 1,394 acres, where predator control and social attraction of seabirds would occur. For waterbirds, 50 acres at the Mana'a Plains wetlands would be enhanced by implementing habitat management and waterbird monitoring. For the Honu, additional funding would increase public outreach and add a marine debris removal component. The draft EIS analyzes potential direct, indirect, and cumulative impacts of the 4 alternatives on the resource topics listed here. This presentation focuses on the covered species, since that's where the primary impacts occur. For the other resource topics, the NEPA analysis found that the potential impacts would be negligible due to minor intensity. Among the covered species, the impacts were to listed seabirds. To understand how the alternatives may affect listed seabirds, Two modeling approaches were used to provide a range of possible population projections for the A'o, or New Shearwater, and Ua'u, or Hawaiian Petrel, over the 50-year permit term. The no action alternative, alternative A, represents the HCP not being implemented. Under this scenario, both the A'o and the Ua'u are expected to decline over the permit term. The estimated population declines are likely due to the lack of maintenance and replacement of the power line minimization measures and the absence of the conservation measures, particularly predator control. Modeling shows that alternative B could result in outcomes ranging from population decline to a significant increase, with the most likely outcome being in the middle range. Alternative C offers only slight improvements over alternative B, and alternative D provides a greater benefit with faster recovery and higher seabird numbers, largely due to expanded predator control. For the covered water birds, alternative A expects no significant impacts to waterbird populations. Alternative B reduces impacts on new and existing power lines near waterbird habitat to reduce waterbird collisions by 90% and provides support for rehabilitating injured waterbirds. Alternative C has the same impact as alternative B since added measures target seabirds, not waterbirds. And alternative D provides the greatest benefit by boosting waterbird survival and reproduction through management at the Mana'a Plains wetland. For the Honu, alternative A would allow take to continue, possibly increasing with rising turtle nesting. Alternative B minimizes impacts through nest detection and light shielding for high-risk beaches. Alternative C has the same effect as alternative B with no additional measures for Honu. And alternative D offers the greatest benefit with expanded funding for outreach, volunteer support, and marine debris removal to improve turtle survival. This concludes the overview of the draft EIS. For an in-depth description of our impact analysis, refer to Chapter 3 of the draft EIS. This slide contains links to resources available through the internet. The first link is the Pacific Islands Fish and Wildlife Office's website. Here you can download the draft HCP and draft EIS and find instructions on how to provide comments on both documents. The second link provides the press release that announced publication of the two documents. The third link takes you directly to the Federal Register notice for the draft HCP and EIS. As with the first link, you will be able to download both documents and provide public comments, which I'll cover in the next slide. The clickable links will be provided shortly in the chat. There are two ways to provide written comments. The first is online through regulations.gov. It can be accessed through the website listed here or through the link for the Federal Register notice on the previous slide. Make sure to use the docket ID number listed here to find the appropriate page. You may also mail written comments to the address listed here. If doing so, please include all the address information listed on this slide. Public comments on the draft HCP and draft EIS will be accepted through end of day on Tuesday, October 21st, 2025 on the federal side. Please note all written comments must be postmarked by October 21st, 2025 to be included as an official public comment under NEPA and ESA. The state DLNR has a slightly different comment period ending on October 22nd that Jesse will go over in the next presentation. Now I will pass it on to Jesse Adams from the Division of Forestry and Wildlife under DLNR. He will provide an overview of the state process for the draft EIS and the draft HCP.
All right, Jesse, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. Aloha mai kako. Thank you for your attention this evening. I am Jesse Adams with DOFA Habitat Conservation Planning. As project lead, I am presenting on the state habitat conservation planning process and the Hawaii Environmental Policy Act, or HEPA. In this presentation, I will cover how HEPA is applied to this project, what a habitat conservation plan is, a description of the multi-step HCP process, what the ESRC is and who is currently serving on this committee, and finally, provide the public with upcoming events where you can learn more about this HCP and provide testimony to make sure your concerns are heard. The Hawaii Environmental Policy Act, or HEPA, was ratified in 1974 and is guided by the Hawaii Revised Statutes, Chapter 343, and the Hawaii Administrative Rules 11-200. It mirrors the federal process that we previously heard. However, in the state process, it is applicant-driven. HEPA can be defined as a system of environmental review that examines the biological, social, cultural, and economic impacts of proposed projects. In this case, the review was completed for actions proposed as incidental to KIUC's operation of power lines and lighting, along with mitigative conservation measures like seabird colony protection, providing funding to save our shearwaters for the benefit of injured water birds, and implementing safeguards for turtle nests. This analysis was triggered by KIUC's use of state and conservation district lands for their mitigative conservation actions. We encourage the public to comment on this analysis by October 22nd. Your testimony will be collected along with other comments from non-governmental organizations and state agencies. The draft EIS will then be revised accordingly, taking into account all comments submitted by the deadline, to include yours. This revised final document will be presented to the Board of Land and Natural Resources, or BLNR, and ultimately they will accept or reject this final document. For those of you that may be familiar with HEPA, you might ask why an environmental assessment, or EA, was not developed. The actions outlined in this project were initially considered to have significant environmental impacts, and therefore the use of an EA, even as a screening tool, was not considered appropriate. A Habitat Conservation Plan, or HCP, is a formal planning document developed for endangered species conservation on state and private land, contributing to recovery efforts through partnerships and proactive planning. This document, and the HCP process as a whole, is guided by the Hawaii Revised Statutes, Chapter 195D, and must meet its criteria. It is a collaborative process between the state and federal government and the applicant. As we know, Hawaii is unique and is one of the few, if not the only state that memorializes protection for threatened and endangered plants in statute. An HCP must provide a net recovery benefit for all covered species, which is usually defined as 1-for-1 replacement. For more information, see Hawaii Revised Statutes, Chapter 195D-30. Due to the large take request proposed by KIUC of 6,595 a'o, or newel shearwater per year, and 2,479 ua'u, or Hawaiian petrel per year, and the uncertainty of the total number of seabird burrows across the entire island, net benefit has been interpreted differently for this project. The applicant has modeled two scenarios for these species: a worst-case scenario based on the assumption that populations outside of the mitigation sites are in decline, and a steady-state scenario based on the assumption that these populations are neither increasing nor decreasing. The applicant has proposed that net benefit is provided by increasing the populations of these two seabird species above the two modeled scenarios while maintaining a stable population of each species. The service has defined a stable population as one that has 2,500 breeding pairs and 10,000 individuals. DOFA has agreed to this definition. population increase above the modeled scenarios is achieved by augmenting the number of breeding pairs and the number of fledglings that survive. This will be accomplished through minimization strategies like placing diverters on power lines and through seabird colony protection measures like predator control and social attraction. The actions outlined in the final approved HCP for the benefit of the taken species allow for the issuance of an incidental take license, or ITL. This temporary license allows for the take of these endangered species in activities that are incidental to the project. Basically, it will allow for the take of endangered species by KIUC's power lines and lighting. It is important to note that without this license, any take of endangered species is prohibited, and prosecution is at the division's discretion. Since an HCP is developed to protect an endangered species, it must be thorough and future-proofed. Key items that must be discussed in the document per statute are the project area and environment, the impacted species, the anticipated effects of the proposed taking, which culminates in a take request, how impacts to the species will be minimized and mitigated, and how those actions will be funded. One of the most important aspects of any HCP is the fact that it is a forward-looking document. To account for any foreseen or unforeseen changes, the applicant and agencies develop adaptive management protocols to adjust the conservation actions so that species mitigation criteria can be met. ITLs for other projects in the state have been issued for about 20 years. Therefore, KIUC's request of 50 years is unprecedented and new territory. Therefore, this plan must have a robust adaptive management. Now that we understand all the components of an HCP and the collaboration that is required to draft it, in addition to the approval process, which we will cover in upcoming slides, DOFA has observed that they usually take at least 1 year to draft. Often it is longer due to the nature of the project, species requested, and unforeseen circumstances. There are 5 main participants in the state HCP process: the applicant, DOFA, ESRC, BLNR, and the public. The applicant is the project proponent and voluntarily develops the HCP in collaboration with state and federal agencies. They implement approved avoidance, minimization, and mitigation measures. They monitor success of the plan's biological goals, and they submit annual compliance and monitoring reports. The Division of Forestry and Wildlife, or DOFA, is the primary administrator of the HCP program, which provides technical assistance to applicants and collaborates on development of the HCP, processes any necessary paperwork, oversees compliance and conducts on-site inspections, submits recommendations to the ESRC and BLNR, and coordinates with other DLNR entities for enforcement. The Endangered Species Recovery Committee, or ESRC, is an independent scientific advisory body, and their role will be outlined in upcoming slides. The Board of Land and Natural Resources, or BLNR, is the ultimate decision-making authority in this process. They delegate authority for or hold public hearings to collect your comments and concerns. Additionally, they make all final decisions on the approval, suspension, or revocation of habitat conservation plans and incidental take licenses. Finally, the public is a key stakeholder and provides oversight and engagement for the process through submitting testimony during public comment periods and at ESRC and BLNR meetings to influence the approval process. The ESRC is an advisory committee that provides scientific guidance to the Board of Land and Natural Resources on matters impacting endangered or threatened species of flora and fauna. It was established under Hawaii Revised Statutes, Chapter 195D-25. The committee is composed of 7 members, with 2 field conservation biologists, Dr. Lindsay Young and Lisa Spain, A person possessing a background in Native Hawaiian traditional and customary practices, Dr. Kavika Winter. The chairperson of the Board and Land of Natural Resources, delegated to Dave Smith. The Ecoregion Director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, delegated to Michelle Bogardus. The Director of the U.S. Geological Survey Biological Resources Division, delegated to Karen Corteau. And the Dean of the University of Hawaii at Manoa College of Natural Sciences, delegated to Dr. Melissa Price. The purpose of the committee is to review and recommend to the Board of Land and Natural Resources actions to take on all applications and proposals for habitat conservation plans, or HCPs, safe harbor agreements, or SHAs, and incidental take licenses, or ITLs. This is accomplished through an annual review process and site visit. At meetings, the committee provides technical insight and recommendations to the applicants, licensees, and landowners to ensure the success of endangered species restoration efforts. There are 10 major steps in the habitat conservation planning process. It starts with an initial meeting between the applicant and DOFA HCP staff. The applicant shares specifics about their project and which endangered species may be impacted by their operations. This, along with other essential information, is collected in the ITL, or incidental take license, application packet. Building on this application, the applicant then works with HCP staff and DOFA biologists to develop an HCP document. This plan is then published in the environmental review, and a public comment period begins, which lasts 60 days. The ESRC committee will then review the draft, which is occurring now and highlighted in yellow on the slide. Also, the committee will conduct an on-site inspection. DOFA HCP staff will hold a public hearing on the affected island to solicit public comments and questions about the draft plan. All of this information is then shared with the applicant, who revises and refines the document, producing a final product. This final HCP is then voted on by the ESRC for recommendation to the BLNR. Ultimately, the BLNR will vote to approve or reject the final HCP. There are several upcoming events for the second draft KIUC HCP. The first is an ESRC limited meeting at Honopu. Due to the sensitive ecology of the native dominant forest at the mitigation site and the presence of numerous endangered species there, along with the dangers associated with access, it is not practicable for the public to participate. However, per Hawaii Revised Statutes, Chapter 92-3.1, a video recording of this visit will be made publicly available, and the committee will make no decisions during this visit. There is tentatively a meeting on October 28th for the committee to discuss the reviews of the second draft HCP. This meeting may change, and we will inform everyone of the new meeting date. In early November, we will hold an in-person public hearing to collect comments on the HCP. The final vote on the HCP by the ESRC and the BLNR will most likely occur next year. However, the final ESRC meeting may yet occur during 2025. Since the natural resources of Hawaii are held in public trust, it is imperative that the public participates in the HCP process. This is done by reviewing both the DEIS and second draft HCP to learn more about the impacts of KIUC's operations and the effects they will have on our native species and how they plan to offset their take through conservation work in Kokee, Limahuli, and Manoa Valleys. Please remember to provide testimony during the state public comment period, which ends on the 22nd of October. If your comment is focused on the DEIS, please send it to Ms. Dawn Huff at KIUC, 4463 Pahe'e Street, Suite 1, Lihue, Hawaii, 96766-2000 or email hcp@kiuc.coop. Please send written testimony for the HCP to dofa.hcp@hawaii.gov or by post to Hawaii Department of Land and Natural Resources, DOFA, Attention Habitat Conservation Planning, 1151 Punch Bowl Street, room 325, Honolulu, Hawaii, 96813. We look forward to everyone attending ESRC meetings to listen to expert scientific review of this document. This will occur before the end of the year, and a live broadcast is available on the Endangered Species Recovery Committee YouTube channel. A notice for this meeting will be posted on the state calendar. Please let me know if you would like to be added to our meeting notification listserv. Finally, we will be back on Kauaʻi in November for a public hearing to collect your comments. Public notice will be posted on the official state and county calendars and in the newspaper and Kauaʻi Now. We value your insights and look forward to your continued participation in the process. Mahalo for attending this informational meeting. If you have any questions about my presentation or the KIUC HCP, please do not hesitate to message me at jesse.w.adams.researcher@hawaii.gov or call 808-265-3276. I hope you all have a great evening. Thank you for your attention. Back to you, Jennifer.
Great, thank you, Jesse. And thank you to Dawn, Layla, and Jesse for their informative presentations this evening. We have a little bit more information to provide to you tonight before we adjourn. As previously discussed by our presenters, we're looking for comments on both the draft HCP and the draft EIS. This slide provides information on how to comment on both documents through the state process and the federal process. I do want to emphasize that comments through the state process must be received or postmarked by October 22nd, 2025, and comments through the federal process must be received or postmarked by October 21st, 2025. Mahalo for listening. Thank you all for joining this virtual public meeting this evening. The recording of this presentation will be made available in the coming days at dlnr.hawaii.gov/wildlife/HCP/draft-HCPS/. Thank you, everybody. This meeting is now adjourned.